Hi everybody, Shavua Tov. I am here tonight because I know there's been a lot of questions about our campaign, the I Was Supposed to Have a Baby campaign. There's also been a lot of questions about why I started I Was Supposed to Have a Baby, more about my story, and so on and so forth. So I wanted to come on and really be here for all of you and see what kinds of questions I can answer. I wanted to share with you a little bit about my why, about why this work is so deeply important to me. Also tell you a little bit about the craziness of my last day. And so that's what we're going to do tonight. I will take as much time as we need. Let me just see what's going on here. Okay, so just to go back for a second. So I want to tell you about my story, so we're going to do that now, and then I'll just share with you a little bit more about what's going on. So for me, this work, as many of you know, this work is deeply personal. I had secondary infertility. After my first child, we were trying to get pregnant with my second, and it took us about a little over 3 years to be able to do that. And so I'm going to talk more about that. I'm just going to give a little bit of an overview and then go back to some more details, and I'm happy to answer questions at any point. So we went through a period of about 3+ years of secondary infertility, and then we also had 6 miscarriages in the course of my fertility journey. 2 of those miscarriages were very early. One was a chemical pregnancy, one was at 8 weeks. And then I also had 4 second trimester losses, all around 16 or 17 weeks. And so when I come on here and I do this work and I try my best to sit and support all of you, it's because it's deeply personal for me. I obviously have not experienced all of the things that each of you are going through, but I have experienced enough to know about the different emotions and about the different pain. And the idea for me was, once I started talking about my story, and I didn't start talking about it until after I had finished having all of my kids, which is very different than many of you who are sharing your stories right now. You know, many of the people that we have who are coming on the page are talking about what they're going through right at this moment. They're talking about their pain as they're experiencing it, and it's not in the past for them. For them, it's very much the present. That was not me. I really didn't start talking about things until after I was finished. But once I did, it struck me, and we're talking about over 6 years ago. It really struck me as that this was a space in the Jewish community that there was a lot of work being done, but the work that was being done was still not bringing this kind of education to the fore, this kind of discussion to the fore. And that's the piece that I wanted to change. So I'm going to go backwards and then go forwards and spend a little bit of time. I'm happy to answer questions. I see there's one here. Were you nervous to open up at first? Yeah, so I'm going to go back and I'm going to answer that in this discussion. So for me, there were pieces of my story that I did not start talking about until I started doing this work right here. And then there were pieces of my story that I did share openly. So the piece that I originally spoke about in regard to the secondary infertility, the fertility treatments that we went through, I never shared them until I started talking, I was supposed to have a baby. Infertility is really hard. It's very private. And I really wasn't comfortable at that point sharing it with anyone, honestly. Our parents didn't know. Certainly none of our friends knew. So when all of you talk about how you don't share it and you don't, that it's not part of your discussion and it's something that you're hiding, I totally get it, because we didn't share about it either. But there was that period. So we had about 3 years of secondary infertility. I We spent a year trying to get pregnant, then went to a reproductive endocrinologist who gave us Clomid and IUIs. I got pregnant on our first cycle, and that ended in a miscarriage at 8 weeks. There was never a heartbeat. It was a blighted ovum. And then I decided to have a DNC to take the baby out. I ended up having many, many medical complications. Afterwards, I had some retained tissue. I ended up back in the hospital on IV antibiotics. We spent really months afterwards trying to make sure that I was really cleared to get pregnant again. Finally, I was cleared to get pregnant. We switched doctors because I had been traumatized by that whole experience. We switched doctors. That next doctor recommended injectables and an IUI, so meaning medicines just like IVF, where basically you are injecting yourself. It's not just a pill that you take in your mouth, but you're injecting yourself with medicines to make more eggs so that you have more of a chance of getting pregnant. So we did that for one cycle. I did not get pregnant. And then we were about to try to start to do another cycle. But then unfortunately, I ended up with an ovarian cyst, which is very common when you do these kinds of, when you take these kinds of medicines. It hyperstimulates your ovaries purposely. And sometimes what happens is that you can end up with a cyst. And once you have this cyst, which is just a very enlarged follicle, a large place where the egg was, you cannot take any more medicines that month to stimulate more egg production. It's actually dangerous. So that cycle, we had an off cycle or a natural cycle. I'm a person, so our infertility was unexplained. I'm someone who ovulates regularly. My husband's sperm had been tested and there was nothing wrong with it. So we were in the unexplained category and did not know why we were having difficulty getting pregnant, but we went forward with these treatments trying to increase our odds. So that next cycle, we had a natural cycle, meaning that I just ovulated on my own, and we did do an IUI at the same time, in addition to just being together, and that was the cycle that I ended up getting pregnant with my son. So that period of secondary infertility, that 3.5-year period, was a strange one for us, as I said, because it was unexplained infertility. And from that moment on, we did not have difficulty getting pregnant anymore. As fast as that came on, I had a daughter already, no difficulty getting pregnant with her. And then had this period of 3.5 years, 3+ years. And then from that moment on, we never had problems getting pregnant again. It was just very strange. But so I had my son. I nursed him for a year, the same that I did for my daughter. And then I finished nursing him. I finally got my period, got pregnant again. Thank God that was a healthy pregnancy. I had my daughter. So now I have 3 kids. So a daughter, a son, and a daughter. And nursed her for a year, same. And then we were thinking, I'm in the modern Orthodox community. We thought our family was going to be, God willing, we hoped it was going to be, 4 or 5 or 6 children. We weren't stopping at 3. And so, again, got finished nursing her, and then got pregnant again right away, and, figured everything was fine. What ended up happening is that I had a totally uncomplicated pregnancy. Everything was working out perfectly. I had a heartbeat at 8 weeks. I always used to get nervous around the 8-week mark because I had that earlier loss between my daughter and my son. But I had a heartbeat, and my doctors always said that if you have a heartbeat, you're going to be fine. There's never going to be any issues with the pregnancy. And, most likely, he didn't say never, but he said basically most likely there are never going to be issues with the pregnancy. You'll be fine. And so, I had a perfectly uncomplicated pregnancy. I walked in for my 16-week appointment, and there was no heartbeat. They couldn't find a heartbeat on the ultrasound. We tried multiple times. There was no heartbeat. It was inexplicable. It was awful. It was horrible. And there were no explanations. I decided, again, there are a lot of decisions that need to be made very quickly when you find out that your baby dies. The decisions are, the biggest decision that you need to make is whether you're going to deliver that baby naturally or whether you want to have a surgical procedure to take the baby out. I'm a doctor by training, as most of you know, and I always used to feel that I wanted these babies out as quickly as possible. I didn't want to wait, because the faster the babies came out, the faster I would be able to start the grieving process and start to be able to try to move through it and move past it. And so with my 8-week loss, I chose to have a D&C, a surgical procedure to take the baby out. With that 16-week loss, that first one, many of you know that was one of 4 losses, which I'll get to in a second. So for that 16-week loss, I also, instead of choosing to deliver naturally, I chose to have a surgical procedure to get the baby out. And it was awful. The whole thing was terrible. And we asked our rabbi, we were allowed to do testing on the baby. That was a healthy baby. There was nothing genetically wrong with the baby. That baby was a boy. And we were just kind of told, it happens, it's a fluke. Like my doctor said, you've had 3 healthy pregnancies. There's no reason to think that there's anything wrong here. It happens, sometimes it happens, for reasons we don't understand, babies die. He said, try again, you'll be fine. So look, eventually we did decide to try again. I'm not talking about the grief now. We'll talk about the grief in a second. Tried again, got pregnant again. Thankfully, getting pregnant, not my problem anymore. We got pregnant very quickly. Again, made it past the 8-week mark. I had a heartbeat. I was like, okay, God willing, God willing, God willing, everything will be fine. I get to the 16-week appointment, and thankfully everything is still fine. And I'm like starting to breathe a little bit easier. But like basically, this was Pesach time, Passover, and they do routine blood work around that time. And so it was right before Pesach. I'm sorry, that appointment was right before Pesach. Everything was fine. We went away. That was the year that we were going away for Pesach. We were in Florida. And I turned on my phone after the first 2 days of the holiday. So for those of you who don't know, the first 2 days and the last 2 days of the holiday are considered to be more stringent days, where you're not supposed to use electricity in the same way that on the Sabbath, on Shabbos, where you don't use electricity. And so I turned on my phone after the second day of the holiday, and there was a message from my OBGYN saying that I needed to call him right away. So I spoke to him the next morning, and he said, your blood work came back. The blood work for the baby came back that there's a problem with the baby. And, you can wait. There's no problem. Like, you can wait until you come home, and we'll do testing. And he recommended an amniocentesis, which is basically where they stick a needle into the cord of the baby. I think it's the cord. Oh gosh, I feel like I'm saying something now that might be wrong. But basically, I said that totally wrong. I can't believe they stick a needle into the uterus, and they get some amniotic fluid. And basically from that amniotic fluid, they can do testing, and they can see the genetic makeup of the baby. And so he said, you can wait until you come back. Don't worry. Everything is going to be fine. Enjoy your vacation. But I was already totally on edge, and I was like, no. I'm like, we'll find a doctor down here. Can you get me the name of a doctor? Please, please, please. We ended up finding a doctor in Florida. So this is now on the 2nd or 3rd day of the holiday. The 2nd or the 3rd. It was the 3rd or the 4th day of the holiday. We went to see this doctor, and the doctor's like, look, I can do the amniocentesis, but here are the risks and here are the benefits, and we can get this done. But, let's just go into the other room and just check the baby and do the ultrasound on the baby. And just make sure, and let me see if I see anything that looks bizarre. And we go into that room, and I get on the table, and they put the probe on my stomach, and the baby has no heartbeat. So I was away on vacation. It was in the middle of Passover, Pesach. I have a 17-week baby, 17-week baby at this point that is dead. And again, I'm not wanting to wait until I get home. I'm not wanting to wait until I, to wait until I pass it naturally. I wanted this out and I wanted it now. We found a doctor down in Florida. There was one doctor who did these procedures. One doctor in the area of Florida where we were who did these procedures. We made arrangements with him. Little did I know until I basically woke up after the procedure, but that doctor was a doctor who had an abortion clinic. I remember waking up after the procedure next to this teenage girl, and she was crying and saying, "I want my baby, I want my baby, I want my baby." And I was sitting there and my baby had been dead, and she willfully chose not to keep her baby alive. It was one of the most difficult things I've ever been through, honestly. It was absolutely awful. We came back to the place where we were staying. I had a number of friends who were in the area. They knew I had my husband tell them. We came home. The whole thing was a disaster. It was horrible in every possible way. At that point, we had 2 second trimester losses in a row. That baby, by the way, was also tested, and that baby was also healthy, totally healthy, genetically normal. That baby was a girl. So I'd lost a boy and a girl, totally healthy, and we had no answers. I'm going to try to record it. Yes, I'm going to do my best. We then spent lots of time researching, speaking to different doctors. We traveled to different doctors trying to get a handle on what was happening, why I kept losing these healthy babies, both around the same time. I ended up switching to a high-risk OBGYN at the time to get her to, we got a name of someone to get her to sort of weigh in as to what was going on and try to, give us hope as to what we could expect for the future. We decided, obviously, I shouldn't say obviously, but we did decide to try again. I kept thinking what's happening? Nobody could really give us any answers. They thought that maybe there was some research at that time, and we're talking about between 9 and 12 years ago. There was some research at that time coming out of Israel stating that people who had multiple losses of babies who were healthy, that maybe they had some undiagnosed clotting disorder, and that these women would benefit from taking blood thinners. And so I did go on blood thinners for that next pregnancy, for the third pregnancy, and I still lost the baby at 16 weeks. Again, another healthy baby. We tried again, a fourth time, and again, in the meantime, we had been seeing lots of doctors, doing lots of tests. Nobody had any answers for us. Nobody. They just kept saying, just keep trying. That high-risk OB that we saw gave me an even higher dose of that blood thinner, and I lost the baby again, this time at 17 weeks. So it was all the same. So at that point, I had lost 4 babies in a row, all who were healthy. There were 2 boys and 2 girls. And I was basically a broken mess. Completely broken mess. I basically just hibernated a lot. I didn't really go very many places. I was a mess for most of the time. I could not, I had 3 children who, needed me, and I would put myself together and get them ready in the morning before they would go to school, then fall apart for the hours that they were in school, and then like put myself back together for when they came home between like 4 and 7:30, 8 o'clock when they went to bed, and then fall apart again in the evenings. There are no words. There are just no words to describe. There were lots and lots of people who like just didn't know what to do and didn't know what to say. I think, this idea that when you lose a baby, anytime you lose a baby, it's heartbreaking, and people are like, oh, I'm so sorry, it's so horrible, and oh, this and oh, that. But when you lose 4 babies in a row, there's like nothing to say anymore. There's like literally nothing to say. I was broken every possible way. Like I was just broken. And I think that, I think what I knew, and here's what I'll say, is that grief is a very individual thing. Everybody does it differently. Some people really need to be surrounded by people. They want to be surrounded by their friends and family. They want to go out. They want to be just with others, and that for themselves, that is healing for them. For me, I was totally the opposite of that. I didn't want to see anyone. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I didn't want to be around anyone. I could barely be, with my own family, who like also didn't know what to do with me. Thank you. All of you who are writing in, I just thank you. I'm seeing all of your messages, and I thank you. All I wanted to do was just like be in my bed and cry. Like I just wanted to be in my bed and cry. It was just too hard to be with people. But the thing that there were 2 things that helped me. Number one is that, and I've talked about this here, and this is on our webpage, and I've talked about it in different places over the course of the last 3 years if I was supposed to have a baby. I had one friend who also had been going through second trimester losses. She had 3 around the times that I had my 4. And she was the only one who got it. She was the only one who let me cry and let me scream and let me yell and let me just be, while everyone else kept trying to be like, it's going to be fine. You have 3 healthy kids. Like, why are you complaining? And just forget about that. Or just try again. Or everything happens for a reason. Or like, you can get pregnant. So like all of the things that everybody tells all of you, like, why am I so sensitive to it? It's because they said it to me also. And I really get it. And it was horrible. It was horrible. And so my friend, Rebecca, who I'm still very close with, so she had 3 losses, and she was the reason why I stayed somewhat sane, and I was the reason why she stayed somewhat sane. So if there is a person or people in your life who can be there for you in the way that she was there for me, someone who really gets it, like, just grab onto those people, grab onto them, because they're invaluable. Like, these are the people who really get it. The other piece for me that I knew was that, in general, my personality is that I'm not someone who stays depressed. I'm not someone who, that's not part of my biological makeup. I'm generally speaking a pretty positive person. And so I knew that in time that I would be able to move through the grief, and I would be able to come out the other side of it. I would be able to get to a place where I could be normal, whatever normal is. I mean, it's not normal. Once you've been through this, there's nothing normal about it. But I would get to a place that I could be somewhat myself again. It would take time, but I would get there. And as long as I was given the space and time to be able to grieve and not pushed into anything before I was ready, then I knew that I would get there. And so I did that. And I'm grateful to my friends and my family for, and my husband, frankly, for supporting me during that like hermit phase of my life where I just needed to be left alone. I needed to just work through my grief on my own. And I'm grateful to all of them for allowing me to do that, because I did eventually start going back to shul. I did eventually start getting back and going to Shabbos meals. I did eventually start, doing carpools and pickup for my kids for school. I did eventually get back to all of those things. It just took time. So to all of you out there, like, grief is a very individual process. Each of you knows what you need. I needed to be alone until I was ready to come out again. And that was what worked for me. Fast forward through the story, basically, so after that fourth loss, I was broken. Like, my body was physically a mess. I was emotionally a wreck. And it seemed clear at the time that there was nothing that we could do that would guarantee us a healthy pregnancy. Like, my body was just not capable of holding another pregnancy. I'm also not sharing all of these different pieces about, we also did, like, in Judaism, there is what's called the hishtadlus, and then there's called the ruchnius. So the hishtadlus is the practical medical pieces of what you need to do to get something done. It's the practical pieces. I'm using medical because in this case it was specifically the medical pieces. We spoke to many and saw many different doctors and got lots of opinions. And tried different medicines, tried different thoughts. We did all of the things that we needed to do from a medical standpoint, from a practical standpoint. We also did the ruchnius pieces, the spiritual pieces. So I tried, saying certain prayers, saying Tehillim. I tried, getting on different chats, and there's the concept in Judaism that if you pray for someone else who has that exact thing that you're looking for, and that person prays for you, there's sort of a reciprocal prayer thing going on, that God will listen. There's also that God will listen to the thing that you want if you pray for somebody else. Of course, none of these things are foolproof, but I prayed for lots and lots of other people who are also struggling to have babies. We got different brachos, we got different blessings from different rabbis here and in Israel and all over the place. I davened, I prayed at different graves, at different holy men, different rabbis, different sites. We did lots and lots of things. We gave a lot of charity. We tried to do all of the things, both from a practical perspective and also from a spiritual perspective. Nothing worked. And I was broken. So I said, we're done. I can't do this anymore. My body is not capable of it. I am broken every possible way, and we're done. And we stopped trying. I spoke to our rabbi, who was always very supportive, and he, understood that I was emotionally a wreck and was like, whatever you need to do is totally fine. And we took a very long break. And when I say now, I say break, and that I'm only saying it in hindsight, because we did end up trying one last time. But at that point, I really thought that I was never going to try to have another baby because I was so broken. It was a couple of years. I don't even remember how long it was, but my husband and I together made the decision that we were going to try one last time. I had healed already. There had been a lot of emotional distance and time between my last loss and this next possible opportunity, and decided to try again. And I basically turned to him. We in this conversation together, there were things that different doctors had mentioned to us over the course of our, traveling around, where people said, oh, you should try this, or oh, you should try that medicine, or oh, you should try that. And I had a very hard time trying anything that didn't have any medical research behind it. I'm a physician. I'm used to seeing research. So people would say like, oh, stand on your head, every second month. I'm like using this example. Stand on your head every second Tuesday, or like eat gluten-free foods, or like do this. And I was like, well, show me where the data is. Like, show me the research. I'm happy to do it if you show me the research. And like when people would tell us these things, there was really no research that they could point to. And so I like couldn't get behind it. But, after this discussion between my husband and I, we basically said we should try one last time and try just to know that we really like made sure that we did every possible thing that we could, that we know that we left no stone unturned, that there was nothing that we didn't try. Because then at the end of the day, it's up to Hashem, it's up to God, but let's at least know that we've done everything in our power to try to make this happen. And so we did. So there were some theories out there about what the reason was why I could be losing these babies. There were 3 possible reasons. One was that maybe that there was as yet some undiagnosed genetic disorder that my husband and I both had, that maybe we were passing on to the baby, and that was causing the baby to die at these points. So my husband and I got tested for every single genetic disorder that was able to be tested for at that point in time. We're talking about, between 9 and 10 years ago. And my husband and I are not carriers for anything. So that was a dead end. The other theory was that it was a clotting disorder, as my doctor had thought, but that it was some undiagnosed clotting disorder, because all of my blood tests had come up totally clean, but that when we saw this expert in specific clotting disorders for women who had recurrent losses, he had said that he puts these women on a much higher dose of blood thinners than my doctor had been putting me on. And so he recommended that if I were to get pregnant again, that I should go on this high dose. So that was number 2. And number 3 was that when the doctors had been looking at the placentas of the babies that I had lost, when they looked at it under the microscope, they saw that there was an indication of these specific cells that indicated there was some kind of inflammation going on. Even though I have had no medical problem, so nobody knew why I was having that the placentas were showing the inflammation. But what they said was that it was very similar to a placenta from someone who had lupus. That lupus patients also have these inflammation markers. And so they recommended that if I were to get pregnant again, that I would have infusions on a monthly basis with intravenous immunoglobulin. It's called IVIG, for those of you who are in the know. And so my husband and I said, okay, we're going to try this one more time. And we're going to, go on the blood thinners, and I'll do this intravenous immunoglobulin. And that way we know that we've done everything possible. And then it's up to Hashem, it's up to God. Obviously all these things are up to God anyway, but we felt like even though these 2 theories by these 2 doctors were totally, they were their best guesses. They had no idea. They were just guessing, and they were like, we'll try, let's try. And so I got pregnant again. Getting pregnant, not my problem anymore, thankfully. I went on the blood thinners. I also did the intravenous immunoglobulin, and we get to that ultrasound where you can see heartbeats. And at that ultrasound, there are 2 babies, 2 heartbeats. And I turned to my husband and I said, oh, look, there are 2 babies. So that means there are 2 babies that will die now at 16 weeks instead of 1. I mean, you have to understand the mindset of someone, for those of you who have not been pregnant after a loss. This is probably very difficult and kind of horrifying to hear. But for those of you who have been pregnant after loss, pregnancy after loss is just an absolutely, it is a state that I do not wish upon anyone. Every single one of those pregnancies after I lost that first 16-week pregnancy I was a mess. I was completely and utterly a mess. As I got closer and closer to that 16-week mark, I stopped sleeping. I was having trouble concentrating on anything else. I had crazy anxiety. It was awful in every possible way. And with this pregnancy, knowing it was the last time that I was ever going to be pregnant because I wasn't trying again, and knowing that I now had 2 babies inside there, it was even more anxiety provoking. I was really not well. I ended up seeing, my doctor had recommended me seeing a psychiatrist who, in conjunction with my high-risk OB, she recommended a short-acting anti-anxiety medicine, which I ended up using on the mornings where I needed to go into the doctor for ultrasounds around the 17 week mark. I was afraid to take it before then, even though I desperately needed it because I was just like another person. But I was starting to have panic attacks, actually. And I knew that I was never going to get out the door to that 16-week appointment or that 17-week appointment, because those were the weeks that my babies died. And like, I didn't want to know. It was too much. So I did end up taking medicine. And I remember like that 16-week appointment was just like, I was petrified, like clutching onto my husband. Look, what can I tell you? It was horrible. It was horrible. Those appointments were horrible. But I have healthy twins who are 8 years old. So what can I say? That pregnancy worked. Why that pregnancy worked and the others didn't, I don't know. Was it because of the blood thinners? Was it because of the intravenous immunoglobulin? Was it because of none of those things? And God just decided we should have a baby at that point, a healthy baby, 2 babies, 2 healthy babies? I don't know. All I know is that they are here and they're delicious and they're typically developed, and I am grateful for them every single day. And so I wanted to spend time with them. What I didn't share with you is that, most of you know I'm a pediatrician by training, and my job was in one of the hospitals in Manhattan, taking care of other people's babies. I was working in the newborn nursery, labor and delivery, and the neonatal intensive care unit. This was all during the time that I was losing my own babies. And after that, after the second trimester loss, I left my job. I could not keep taking care of other people's babies. It was too much for me emotionally. I had 3 kids at home, but I couldn't do it anymore. So I had been out of work, and I was grateful actually to be out of work because I finally had live babies to take care of. And I was grateful to be able to have the opportunity to take care of them. And so I spent 2 years taking care of them. And I finally, when they were 2, my brain was like totally mush. And I was like, I gotta get back to work. Like, I gotta have to do something with this because my brain is mush. And I had started interviewing for jobs again. My specific job at the hospital was not there anymore. It had been given over to nurse practitioners and physician's assistants. So I did have to interview. And right as I was doing that interviewing, one of my local shul started, they wanted to do a program talking about infertility and pregnancy loss. It was a women's program for women by women, and they wanted one person to speak about infertility and one person to speak about pregnancy loss. And they asked me to speak about pregnancy loss. And I agreed. This was 6 years ago. I agreed because, number one, my story was public. Not my 8-week loss, but my 16-week losses. You have to remember, everybody knew I was pregnant. I was visibly pregnant. We had already announced our pregnancies. And so people knew that I was pregnant, and then they knew I was not pregnant. So my story was not private. And so it was easier for me on some level to be able to talk more about it because I didn't have anything to hide. So I did. I was an absolute wreck. I remember the entire week beforehand. I felt like, I have to get up and I have to tell my story and I have to do this. And I've never done it before. I'm I couldn't even I remember I'm sitting and staring at my computer right now. I remember just not being able to get it out. I was trying to figure out, what was I going to say? Was I going to tell all of it? Maybe I'll just get up there and start crying. I just didn't know what I was going to do. And finally, those 24 hours, this was a Shabbos afternoon. So it was a Saturday afternoon program for women by women. And I remember that Thursday and Friday, the story just flowed out of me. I just sat at my computer and it basically wrote itself. And I got up in front of about 150 women and I told my story. And after that, there were a couple of people who came up to me and said, you have to meet this woman named Reva Judas. She runs Nechama Comfort, which is an organization based in Teaneck, New Jersey, that supports people who've been through pregnancy loss and infant loss. And I said, I never heard of her before. Who is that? What are you talking about? Where's she been all my life? Anyway, I met Reva, and that started 3 years of my working with Reva at Nechama Comfort. It's a wonderful organization that supports people who, again, it's specifically a loss organization, but I did lots of different things while I was there. I got trained in grief counseling, and, in addition to my own personal knowledge, and I started doing grief counseling. I ran support groups. I gave lectures. I helped run fundraising events. I did all kinds of things for them. And in the course of my being there, because it was starting to be more accepted to start talking about all of these different issues that go on, the people started talking. I ran their social media also. That's the piece I didn't say. But I started seeing on social media this emergence of all of these different people talking about their problems. People who were Jewish and not Jewish, not anyone who was religious, but people who were it was almost this explosion that I watched happen, that people started doing videos of them giving themselves IVF shots and, videoing them at their appointments, where they were finding out that how many eggs they had harvested, and people videoing themselves again, doing these vlogs of crying when they found out the news that the baby had no heartbeat. It was a wild time. People were posting private moments in their life all over social media. But it was wild in a good way, because what it did is that it really broke stigma. It really, in a very powerful way, it helped people to not be alone anymore. one of the first people who I remember starting to talk about her miscarriages was Dr. Jessica Zucker. She has the hashtag I had a miscarriage, and she was one of the people I spoke to and said, like, how are you getting out and doing this? How are you talking about it? And she said, I have to. I want to. It's something that we need to talk about. And so I started getting lots and lots of phone calls and messages from lots of different people who I had met at different points in my life saying, hey, do you know a best doctor for IVF? And hey, like, I'm really having trouble like getting pregnant, or like, hey, I've been through like all this kind of loss, or I'm struggling here, or how do I do egg freezing? I started getting like all of these different phone calls, and I knew that because my name was out there, that's why people were finding me, and because I was a doctor. So I had this specific lens and specific expertise that I really could assist people. And then at the same time, as I just said, I also saw the emergence of what was happening on social media. It was an explosion. And I said, the Jewish world needs this also. Like, we need to have this as well, because like nobody else is doing it. It needs to happen. And so I left Nechama Comfort. I spent, this was the summer of, we're in 2022. I left Nechama Comfort in the spring of 2019. I spent a number of months talking to the heads of as many different Jewish fertility organizations as I could find. I spoke to just finding out like what was the landscape already, what was already out there. I knew I had this idea. I wanted to bring something to social media, but I really wanted to make sure that I wasn't stepping on anyone's toes, that I wasn't taking away from anyone else's work. I didn't want to duplicate anyone's work, and I didn't want to draw people away from what was already happening. The big names in the community then, and the big names now, A Time, who do incredible work, Bonei Olam, do incredible work, Pua, Kinafayim, Jewish Fertility Foundation, like all of these organizations do absolutely incredible work. I'm not mentioning half of them. And I'm not mentioning any of these organizations. I didn't even mention any of these organizations that are around the world. Hasidah, also, I didn't mention them. But, there are so many incredible Jewish fertility organizations, and I didn't want to take away from any of their work. What I saw was that none of them were really utilizing social media. And so I said, that's what I can do. And so I had this idea. I started bouncing it around different people that I trusted. Toby Carpel, who came on here yesterday when I had no access to my phone or Instagram or anything, who was one of our board members. She's a dear friend of mine. And I kept running names with her, like, what about this? What about that? What about this? What about that? And I remember I was in the gym one day, and I kept like toying with this idea about, I wanted a name for an organization that immediately when you heard the name, you knew exactly what it was. I didn't want there are wonderful names for all of these organizations, but I wanted a name that people knew, I didn't want them to have to think of what it was. And I wanted a name that also evoked emotion, that it made people feel something. And for me, with all of these pregnancies that I lost, the idea that I kept rolling through my head was that I was supposed to have a baby. Like, I was supposed to have all of these babies. 2 girls, 2 boys. They were healthy. I was supposed to give birth to them. They were given to me, and then they were taken away. And so this was the idea that I kept rolling around with. And then also thinking about all of the rest of you that grow up with this idea that you're supposed to get married at a certain point. You're supposed to find your spouse. You're supposed to find a partner. You're supposed to have a certain number of kids. You're supposed to have them in a certain time period. There are a lot of things in life that we're supposed to do, whether that's something that we internally put on ourselves or whether it's the community puts the pressure on us. But there's a lot of these, like, I was supposed to. And that was the name. Toby and I were running back and forth, and I was like, I got it. I was supposed to have a baby. And she was like, oh yeah. I mean, it took a while for us to like really definitively decide, but that was the moment I remember. I was standing in the gym. So we had a name, and I immediately set up an Instagram account. I knew it had to be Instagram where it was going to be, because the main demographic of Instagram are the 20 to 40 year olds. And those are your fertility years in general. Not that people don't try well into their 40s, but Instagram was where the main demographic was. Facebook is it's usually the over 40 crowd. TikTok was sort of just getting started a couple of years ago. Twitter was more specifically, like, it was harder to do what I wanted to do on Twitter. And LinkedIn was more for business. So Instagram was the place where it was at. I set up the Instagram account, and I figured, okay, like, when I'm ready, I'll kind of like start it and get it going. This was ready July. And it's, as I said in that post, there's a post that I put up, I think it was a week and a half, 2 weeks ago. I was on vacation with my husband. We were in Miami, and I was sitting on our balcony in a hotel overlooking the beach. The beach is my happy place. And there was just a feeling that came over me. I just felt that, if not now, when? Like the words of Hillel, one of our sages, it just kept running through my mind. If not now, when? Like, what's the big deal if I start an Instagram account? What's the big deal if I start posting? What's the big deal if I, start moving and start getting this going? And if those of you who've been around for 3 years know, 3 years ago, right around that time, was when Lizzie Savetsky started this campaign, the hashtag Real Love, Real Loss campaign. She and I had already been in touch multiple times, and I asked her if I could share her story and I could start reposting a bunch of really to bring light. I asked her if I could share all of this so that I could just bring light and bring a wider audience to that campaign. But that was the anchor. That was the way we started. And so I was supposed to have a baby. Can you hear me or not? Somebody tell me if you hear me. Leah saying your volume. Somebody tell me if you can hear me. Let me know. Somebody. Thumbs up if you can hear me or not. Thumbs up. I'm going to wait. Okay. Thank you. So yeah, that was the beginning. That was the beginning. Lizzie allowed me to share her story. That campaign went viral and started slowly building and talking about different topics in fertility, hitting different pain points for people. The goal here was always to be as broad as possible, both from a topic perspective and also from a Jewish perspective. So I'll go Jewish perspective first. I knew that even though, look, I am a woman in the modern Orthodox community, and I am not going to pretend to be anyone than who I am, but I did not grow up religious, and I know that there are so many people in the wider Jewish community that are also very much struggling to have a child, whether that's because of infertility or loss or whatever the reasons are. And I also knew that there were lots of people in different swaths of the community who didn't feel accepted by certain other fertility organizations. They felt that it was geared towards one sect of Judaism or another. And I wanted to create a space where everyone could feel welcome and accepted. And so that was always the main tenet of I was supposed to have a baby, to have this be a space for everyone and anyone. But the other piece of it is that I wanted this to be a space where we could talk about all the different kinds of pain that people feel in regard to the struggle to have a baby. So there wasn't a specific diagnosis or a specific, situation that we were only dealing with. It wasn't only infertility. It wasn't only loss. It wasn't only, PCOS or endometriosis or any of these different diagnoses. It wasn't only if you were married. It wasn't only if you were single. It wasn't only if you had a partner or didn't have a partner. This organization, what we do here is for everyone and anyone, because the reality is that the struggle and the pain when you don't have the family that you want or the family that you dreamed of, it doesn't matter where you fall on the Jewish spectrum. It doesn't matter whether you have a partner or whether you don't have a partner. The pain is still very real, and the pain is still needs to be addressed. And so that is what we do when I was supposed to have a baby. But the other thing that I knew is that I wasn't going to give anyone medical guidance, that I wasn't going to provide financial assistance for anyone, that we were not going to be able to give people halachic guidance as to what procedures or what things were allowed according to Jewish law. All of these other organizations were already doing that and doing an incredible job. I knew that I only wanted to hold space for people, that I wanted to do it on social media, but that all of you who are listening, those who are not listening, but that the community of I was supposed to have a baby was also going to reach out to many of the other organizations for support in other ways. And that's absolutely fine. And that's absolutely what I wanted. So that's what we do. That's my story. That's what we do. We hold you here right on social media, but we also make sure that you get the access to the resources that you need, and we direct you out as you need. And that's the story. Happy to take any questions, happy to take any thoughts from all of you. I did want to also talk about what we are doing with this campaign and what we are going to be doing with the money that we raised, which we've mentioned before, but I'm going to mention again. We are raising money right now. This is our annual campaign. We raise money in a big way once a year, not more than that, because we want to use our social media to support all of you. We do not want to use it to be constantly raising funds. That's not what we want. Our money this year is going to be going towards all of our staffing. So our admin, Julia, who is phenomenal, our social worker, Liel, who is absolutely phenomenal as well. Yes, God willing, I'm going to be saving this live. And we're looking to hire an executive director because I need help. I desperately, desperately need help. I want to be doing more and giving more to you right on here, doing more content and more reels and more things. And there are so many things that go on in regard to running a nonprofit on the back end. I need more help. And so we are going to be hiring an executive director with these funds. And if we get into our bonus round, which I hope that we will be, we'll change our goal to $125,000 or $150,000. We have some more plans for that too. And should we get there, I will talk more about that too on the page. But in the meantime, to all of you, I'm here and I was supposed to have a baby because it's personal. It is really personal for me. I get it. You can see I'm still sitting here. For those of you who are just joining now, my last pregnancy loss was over 10 years ago. And as I shared my story tonight, you see that I still cry. Most of the time I don't. most of the time I am really okay and I'm able to do this work and I can be effective and my emotions are on the side. But this is real. Grief is real. Pain is real. And it's personal to me. So I do this work with a full heart because I just want to bring a little bit of comfort to all of you. And with that, I am wishing you a good night. You can always DM at any time. I'm always the person who answers it. There is nobody else who answers those DMs, and I try to get to them as soon as I can. If you have any questions that you want to ask privately, I'm happy to answer them. And to that, I wish all of you a good night.